Kim Curry, welcome to the Conquering Everest podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you being having me here today. It's something
yeah,
I've been actually looking forward to since our original conversation. So
yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you too. Not only because of your, your history and what you've had to deal with, but I've always had a soft spot for radio and broadcast ever since I was a kid. Because I used to sleep with like a little battery operated radio under my pillow and have
transistors.
Yeah, like, and I fantasize about being on the air, although for some reason I never pursued it. But Kim, let's I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and start off, if you don't mind. Just have you introduce yourself to the audience.
My name is Kim Curry, to many in America known as Kid Curry, a 33-year radio broadcaster. I was a DJ in towns like Knoxville, Tennessee, San Antonio, Texas, Pueblo, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, and for 25 of those 33 years, I was in Miami, Florida. Around 2005, after I turned 50, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and kind of brought the career to a screeching halt. And I've had to, first I dealt with 8 years of fairly serious medical problems, and then through the magic of modern science, medicine came along that slowed the progression of my disease. And since then, I've kind of had to rebuild myself. I've had to come up with something new. It was 8 years of fairly dismal times. And then when everything changed, I had to come up with something new.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, when you got the diagnosis and you kind of, once you got to that point where you knew you had to reinvent yourself, in my mind, I think of, how easy it would be for news like that to cause depression, anxiety, different things that people deal with. What was it like for you? What was the hardest part for you beyond the medical?
Well, for 33 years, I was a fairly famous guy. Even when I just had a radio show, all of my radio shows were fortunately fairly famous in the markets that I was in. There was only one, you have a bunch of guys by the name, Don Lewis and Bill Jackson, but there was only one Kid Curry on the radio in America. In fact, I think there's only been one forever. And the reason that happened, first of all, let me tell you how I got the name Kid Curry. First of all, I grew up in Colorado, a little town called Canyon City, Colorado. And in the 1970s, you don't call a little boy Kim. My name is Kim Curry. You don't call a guy Kim. There were no Kims in America back then. So my parents gave me my name. Everyone thinks my name is Casey because I just use my initials. But then when I got on the radio, it came time for me to actually have a name. My first part-time job, when I got hired in high school, my dad came home one day and he asked me if I wanted to babysit the general manager's kids. And so I went to the radio station to do that. And what my dad didn't know was I wasn't there to babysit his kids. The general manager wanted me to babysit the radio station on Sunday mornings when the radio station played back the previous week's church services. Nobody wanted that job. They needed a high school kid. So that was me. But the first time I heard my voice on the radio, my only responsibility was to put these tapes on this machine and start the tape at the right time. But every hour I had to go on and say the following. I remember it well. This is KRLN, Canyon City, Colorado, the station with the news reputation. And hearing my voice in the headphones, I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the radio. My dad was a radio guy. He was a newsman. So I went to college, University of Southern Colorado. I traveled 30 miles to go to Pueblo, Colorado, and go to school there. While I was in school, I had a part-time job at one of the local top 40 radio stations. So the day that I got hired, I was in the studio with the boss, and he had a guy who was recording voices, recording the promos for the radio station, doing all the drops for the DJs. You know, Dickie Dills plays all hit music. And I was standing there, and being the new guy, he turned around to the guy and says, okay, we need to get one for this guy, but Kim, we can't call him Kim. And he turned around and he picked up a record, and he looked at the record and he said, okay, Gary Paxton. Well, the record he picked up was the Monster Mash, and it was written by Gary Paxton. So my first radio name when I was doing 1 day a week in Pueblo, Colorado for 2.5 years was Gary Paxton. So that was my first radio name. 2.5 years into my college education, and with the education I got from working at the local radio station, I was really feeling my oats. So I started applying for jobs around the country. I got a full-time job offer from Knoxville, Tennessee. So I packed up my 1971 Plymouth Valiant with everything I had in it. I called it the car of the future because it had no class. It was white with blue interior, and that was it. And it was plastic and cracked. So it was the car of the future. I packed up all my stuff, and I'm driving across the country to go to my first full-time job. And I was offered the job at 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, I've got to come up with a better radio name than Gary Paxton. So I'm driving across the country to my first full-time job. And I thought, at 10 o'clock at night, I'll call myself Night Smoke. So I drive up to the radio station when I get to Knoxville, and I walk up the stairs and I open the door, and there's a lady sitting at the reception desk, and behind her is this big guy with curly hair, and he had a Hawaiian shirt on. And I reached out to the lady and I said, hello, ma'am, I'm your new nighttime disc jockey. I'm Night Smoke. And the guy behind her says, well, if it isn't Kid Curry. Well, you got to think all the way back to 1970s. There was a TV show called Kid Curry and Hannibal Hayes. They went as Kid Curry, Hannibal Hayes, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid. Mm-hmm. And it was a TV show. Kid Curry was a star of the TV show, and my friends used to always make a joke about the name, hey, kid, and I hated it. So when the guy said, well, if it isn't Kid Curry, my response was, I hate that name, man. And he says, well, then I won't sign your check. And I said, Kid Curry it is. Yeah. Little did I know that, first of all, back in the 70s, radio DJs all had very big, deep voices. But suddenly there was this little guy on the radio with this little tiny voice, and I was a fairly energetic radio DJ. So I was talking high pressure and going fast. And I was there about a week when the guy who hired me got fired. So things got real sticky after about 3 or 4 months. I decided I needed to get out of that job and go to a real full-time job. So we had these air checks. That's how you get a job as a radio DJ. All the things you say, you put those on tape, and that's what you send out. They call those air checks. So you record your show, you cut up the parts that you say, and you send those out. Well, on this particular air check, there's a song by Peter Frampton, Baby, I Love Your Way. Starts off with applause. And he says, thank you. And then he starts playing the song. So I hear the applause. And on the tape, I said, hey, Peter, your zipper's down. He says, thank you. And I went on with what I was going to say on the radio. Well, I put that thing on my tape, my air check, and I sent it out to a bunch of stations around America. And it was Labor Day weekend, 1976. And got to remember, it was the 200th anniversary of America. So we're having this huge thing in the New York harbor. There were water and boats everywhere. And I was sitting there with my roommate, who happened to be a college friend of mine. I mean, a high school friend of mine. He was also in radio. So when I got the job in Knoxville, I got him hired to come out to Knoxville with me. So he and I are sitting there, and the phone rings, and we're watching this thing on TV. And he picks the phone up, and he looks at me, and he says, it's Jerry effing Clifton, and he wants to talk to you. Well, the guy I brought out from my hometown was a much better disc jockey than I was. He was, in the sound of his voice, I could tell he was offended that Jerry Clifton was calling for me and not for him. So I picked the phone up and Jerry said, you know what? There's a ticket waiting for you at the Knoxville airport. You need to come down here tonight. Call your boss, tell him you're sick. You can't come to work. I want to interview to come down to Miami. So that night I was in Miami and got hit with this flush of humidity. I'm from Colorado. I never felt humidity like Miami humidity. But that was the beginning of, the Kid Curry radio show in Miami. And when I was in Miami on 96X, now see, I don't know how much you know about radio. You sound like you're maybe a radio. You might know some of these things, Brian. But, there was a time when top 40 radio music was only on AM radio. Mm-hmm. Way back in the day. FM was for all the, hey, before that we heard, and before that, dude, you know what we heard? That was the kind of thing that was on FM. Well, there was a transition in the early 70s where top 40 music formats made it onto FM radio. Well, radio was very competitive because there's all sorts of advertising money involved. So one of the first markets that put FM radio stations playing top 40 music was in Miami. So one of the radio stations was called 96X. The other one was called Y100. It was the first official hardcore FM top 40 battle in America. And it was famous. But I was a young radio dude with little groupies on the telephone. I really wasn't paying attention. I was just having fun on the radio, okay? So I get to Miami and I start doing these crazy things. And about 6 months afterwards, Jerry Clifton gets dismissed because of an illegal contest the radio station had done years before. The ramifications of all that came about 6 months after I got there. And 9 months after I got to Miami on 96X, he gets fired. And now they bring in this guy that I have no connection with. we're not going to work. Yeah. So I was sending out air checks across America, and I got a call from Y100, the other radio station. Now, the difference between the two, 96X was a very strategic, well thought out top 40 radio station, but used a lot of subliminal things. I mean, our promos would have voices in the background. It was very eclectic. But Y100 was a lot more commercialized, but it was a lot better and had much higher ratings than we did at 96X. And because it was so classy, it was the most famous top 40 FM radio station in America. Take away the FM. It was the most official, the best top 40 radio station in America. I never thought I'd ever go to work over there, because the way we did this in radio was you try to stake your ground. 96X, we're going to beat those guys. We hate those guys. My boss made me mentally not want to go there. I hated those guys. I wanted to beat them in the ratings. So when I was sending out air checks across America, I never anticipated going to Y100. But one night when I was on the radio at 96X, I got a phone call from the guy who was my competition on Y100. He called, and I didn't want to talk to him. Like, who is this communist man? What does he want with me? So it took me a while even to pick up the phone. But when I did, he said that his boss, Bill Tanner, wanted me to come to take his place because he was moving up to, I think, Boston. And they wanted me to come to Y100. So, there I am, first competing against the best radio station in America. And then suddenly I'm on the number one top 40 radio station in America. And so I've worked with Jerry Clifton, genius. Bill Tanner, genius. These are on my resume. It really helps my cred. So I get big jobs after this because of that. But the jobs that I get are always under the auspices of Jerry Clifton and Bill Tanner. After they were program directors, they went off to become consultants. So I got hired to go be a program director by Jerry Clifton in Texas. And then Bill Tanner went up to Washington, D.C. So he hires me to come to D.C. So over these 25 or 33 years, I'm in San Antonio, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. I go back to Miami. My father has both legs amputated. So I take a year off of Miami, and I say, I got to go. So now I've been to Miami twice. I go home back here to Colorado to take care of my dad. He has both legs amputated. I come home to build ramps and help widen the doors of his house, which is really not true because all his friends did that. I'm there for a year and he's suddenly like, well, why are you here? I thought you were the big time radio guy. Because remember, my dad was a radio guy. Yeah. My dad knew that his son was on the biggest stations in America. What are you doing coming home to me? So after a year of trying to help him out, he convinced me to go back. And fortunately, I got a call to go back to Miami for the third time. But the progression of program directors, the guy who had been Bill Tanner's assistant at, boy, I don't want to confuse you too much, but eventually Bill Tanner takes over 96X, but it was a new name. They called it Power 96. Oh. So Power 96 comes and offers Bill a whole bunch of money. He leaves all his situations and comes there. He is actually forced out of the business because of some illegal thing that came up. So that he gives his job to his assistant, Frank Walsh. Now, Frank and I were best friends in fact, he was the guy who answered the phone the night I got the call from Y100. He was my phone guy. So he and I had become programming partners. And as I was going around the country being interviewed for jobs and things like that, I always referred to him as my music director. When I come to work for you, I will bring him as my music director. So he was always my assistant. But through circumstances, he ends up being Bill Tanner's assistant at Power 96. He has a problem getting the ratings going. He goes away. Now, they make me the interim program director. This guy, Kid Curry's been around this operation so much. It's still the same thing he's been doing for 30 years, or actually 25 years at the time. Just let him be the interim, and we'll go out and we'll find the best program director in America to come over and take over this powerhouse mammoth radio station. Well, I kept telling him, it needs to be me. I don't know why you're going other places to be a program director. This needs to be me. So I end up convincing them after 6 months, because they bring programmers in from New York and San Francisco, and I'd be sitting at the desk and they'd walk in with these guys and I'd know who these guys were, and they'd say, well, this is Kid Curry. He's our interim till we decide who we're going to hire. And they'd walk out the door and I'd tell the GM, no, it's got to be me. Well, after what I started doing was making changes at the radio station. While the boss was busy trying to hire somebody, I started making changes at the radio station. At that point, the ratings start going up. So 6 months after I take over for the first time, these guys were finally convinced that I needed to be the program director. So I got to be program director of the original station I went to work at in 1976. Only by then it had changed names. Now it was Power 96. Right. And for the next 9 years, the radio station has the most success in its entire history. I was on a roll. I was in a groove. I was working with people that I knew. I was handed a really good operation. It just so happens I had a different frame of mind on how to motivate these people. Radio stations rolling like crazy. In 2004, I come home to visit my mother here in Colorado. My mom says the week I'm there, she says, something wrong with you. You're not walking right. And admittedly so. I could tell there was something wrong with my legs. There was something wrong with my feet. Then before I left on the airplane, it was just after Christmas in 2004, she said, look at your eye. Your eye is drooping. There's something wrong. And so I go back to Miami and I go to my chiropractor lady. I mean, I've only gone to a chiropractor. I didn't know anybody else. Right. So I go to the chiropractor lady. I said, my feet are messed up. I'm not walking right. Could you kind of adjust my back? And she says, there's something else going on here, man. You need to see a doctor now. And so after about, this was 2005, March 2005, 6 months afterwards, I'm diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, I am type A personality. My radio station, I lived and breathed it. And if you know about radio, they don't shut off. Right. They go 24/7. And when you're the guy in charge, you listen 24/7. My children were raised with the radio on behind the TV so I could listen to what was happening. I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure they were saying the right things. It was my obsession But when I got diagnosed with MS, I was at when the verdict came down, I was in Naples, Florida at a corporate meeting. Got a phone call from my doctor. I left the meeting, went into a room. She said, Mr. Curry, you have multiple sclerosis. After 6 weeks of testing, this is what's wrong with you. And I was like, okay. I went back into the meeting and I packed up my stuff. See you guys. They just said I have MS. I don't know what that means. I'm going to go. I'll see you. Got in my car, called my wife. She sat there and did the 2005 version of Google. And as I was driving back across Alligator Alley, I learned about multiple sclerosis. And I learned that you can die from multiple sclerosis. And so by the time I got home, I had already decided. It's a 3-hour drive. By the time I got home, I'd already decided that I was really done, because I knew I was up against a mission and I was failing rapidly. These symptoms that I had then had flared up during my life. I just didn't know what they were. I thought I had a cold, or maybe I just needed an adjustment to chiropractor. But finally in 2005, they came on very strong. And so I got forced out.
Yeah.
So that's my story. How'd you get me to do that, Brian? That was good.
That's a great story, great back history on you. As you were talking, I was down in Florida, early 90s, just a teenager, me and my buddy being rebellious. We just took off and went there. So I was trying to think, didn't I listen to you? Because I remember 96, I remember some of the names that you were out there. But who knows?
Those two stations are still on. They have been on since the early 70s. They are famous in the business and in South Florida. However, because of the corporate rapage of radio back in 1996, they are nowhere scoring the kind of ratings that we used to get back then. They're there, but they're not doing as well as they did.
They used to. So as you kind of go back to when you got the news and you drove home and you've made this decision, what was life like for you for, say, the next 6 months as I would imagine it's a pretty big adjustment period, not only physically and medically, but, to come to grips with lifestyle changes?
My wife likes to refer to that 6 months as our snow globe moment.
Okay.
One day everything was fine. Then all of a sudden our snow globe got shook. And I think that's pretty good.
That's good analogy.
I had to decide what to do. I mean, I thought, well, geez, I can't stay here in Florida if I'm not going to work. Fortunately, my company, it's funny. I had one of the ladies who was the office manager. Her name was Phyllis. Because as the program director of this very powerful radio station, people knew me, and they knew that when I could pay attention and when I couldn't. She would come to my office and put things on my desk and say, sign this. Don't worry about reading. Sign it and sign it, sign it. And she had brought in somewhere over those 9 years a long-term insurance policy that I had signed, and I didn't even know it.
Oh, wow.
So I get diagnosed and I quit. And then I'm panicking. It's like the day after I go in, I tell the boss I'm going to resign, and the people are coming into my office and they're saying, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know, man. I got to go take care of myself. I got to just go. What are you going to do for money? I don't know. I just got to go. And then she came into my office and she says, by the way, you don't have anything to worry about. I was like, what? She said, yeah, 4 years ago, I had you sign this piece of paper. So you're full term, man. And fortunately, it was quite financially aggressive. And I was very well taken care of. But I didn't know that the first 2-3 days. But then when I knew that was there, it gave me the freedom to go, okay, now what? And my wife and I could sit back and say, what's going to happen? What do you want to do? What's going to be best for us? And I had just had a child. My little Casey was about 1.5 years old at the time. And so we decided to move back to my hometown. I figured that, if I was going to get sick and if I needed some help, there's still people in Canyon City, Colorado, who are my high school buds. And if I need some help, they would help me. And I knew they would. And so we decided we'd go back there. And then My wife thought that it would be good that she got into. We actually started some flipping and what is it, fixing and flipping things. We
Oh,
started
the houses and different things.
houses and things, and did that for a while. But you know what happened is she didn't like the way she was treated by the real estate people.
Oh,
So she came home one day and says, "I'm going to get my license." And then a year later, she had her license. And then a year later, she's breaking records in the state of Colorado per capita in our little town of Canyon City, and has since stopped selling houses, but is now an international consultant on selling houses to people that have to sell at least 100 houses a year.
wow.
So my creation, my recreation, because remember she was my date at the Grammys on my arm every year for years, and we come out here and she finds this thing, and now she's blown up super huge. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but I'm a real fan of my wife.
But yeah, no, and I mean that's excellent to think about, because a lot of times folks and myself included, something major happens and you struggle to figure out what's next, as to where through your your health, like if this wouldn't have happened, then this whole chapter of your life, your wife's life, that none of that happens. It's
Brian, you know as well as I do, and you may be a victim of this. You bring something like this into your house, and it can tear the relationship apart. I mean, I thought I didn't know. I wondered, but she's Cuban, man. I'm sorry. That Cuban came out real quick. She's like, "We're gonna find you the best doctors. You're gonna get the most medicine. You're gonna da bada bada bada." And she was adamant, man, and
had your back.
You learn things. I did not know how expensive it was to be disabled in America. I get a wheelchair. I get one for 5 years, but I got to make a choice. And I have an electric one in my house. But in order to leave my house, that means I have to have a vehicle that can transport this thing. So that costs. Or you decide to go ahead and buy your own wheelchair and have a portable in the car, which is a cost. I have to have ramps to get into my house. In fact, I have an elevator that gets me from the ground floor into my home. I have to pay for that. So I learned a lot, man. And, and I learned that this, unfortunately, the richest country on the planet does nothing for people like me and us.
Yeah, I hear you.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Again, these are things that actually, this is in my book. I go through this, and Come Get Me, Mother, I'm Through. I go point by point why these things are an issue and why we need to fix this.
In the book itself, when did you write that? That was just recently, right? It wasn't it's been a while.
I'm going to tell you something. It's a fog to me now. I can tell you that I would imagine that we're at 2000. I would say 2003 probably is when I finished it. But that process was unique too, because, Brian, when I first got diagnosed, there were only 5 multiple sclerosis drugs that I knew of. 8 years into it, there's now 8. My doctors decide that, Dr. Bowling says, there's new stuff out there, man. This medicine's not helping you. You continue to degrade. We need to do something differently. And it's the truth. When I got diagnosed, I was still walking, but then I went to a cane, to crutches, to a wheelchair in about 2 years. So the doctor's like, "You're not getting any help here, bro. We got to change this medicine." But he was also adamant, and this is something that I want MS patients to hear. You need vitamin D. You need to supplement vitamin D. I take around 5,000 IUs a day. It all depends on how I've filled up my little box, my little squares. I take about 5,000 IUs of vitamin D every day. Dr. Bowling is adamant when he says that MS patients have a desire in their body for more vitamin D. And there's something that, actually all humans need vitamin D. We get it from the sun, but nobody has numbers that are substantial enough that you need more all the time. But MS patients specifically need more. So, I changed my medicine, and he says, "Okay, start taking vitamin D." And I'm like, "Doc, come on, man." I'm an old man. I'm a radio DJ. We make jokes about vitamins,
Yeah.
the radio. What are you talking about? Vitamins only. My mom takes vitamin C. I'll never catch a cold as she's sneezing at me. So I fought him for 6 months, but then my wife, she was like, maybe he's right. And she really was on me for 6 months. So 6 months into my new drug, I went from Rebif to Copaxone. I start taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D. Now, 6 months later, it's noticeable that I'm not degrading anymore, that my condition had leveled off. Whether it was the medicine or the vitamin D or the combination of the two, something stopped that. And so since about, I don't know, my math, 2003 or so, 2002 or so, things have kind of leveled off for me.
Okay.
Which was, then I got a whole nother mindset I got to deal with.
Right.
I thought I was going to die. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's hope here.
And now
this is pretty cool.
And what is the prognosis for you right now as you plan on living a long, full life?
I can tell you that nothing changes. I have right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm having major seizures of my lower extremities. My legs are sticking straight out. I'm on baclofen, the drug baclofen, to stop that, but I take as much as you possibly can without having to have a bag strapped to you and inserted in your system. My condition is leveled off. I don't get worse, but I still have exacerbations. There will be some days, that I just can't, specifically around low pressure systems. And, some doctors will fight you on that. But I'm telling you that I can tell that I start getting real brain foggy and my joints hurt. My spasms are worse when I hit low pressure systems. So I'm fairly stable now. But when this all kind of stopped back in 10, 11 and 12, I was really, in fact, you couldn't even hear my voice. My voice had closed off. There's an MS, they call it dystopia. I don't know if that may not be the word. But there's something that happens to MS patients. So you could hardly hear me talk. But my doctor has surmised that you can re-heal things. I mean, things heal after a while. And when my condition leveled off, I can tell you my voice got better. My response got better. My wife said that I was more responsive and I was quicker on my feet. In my chair. So I was becoming more cognizant. So, I think your body can heal. So since about, I don't know, 2003, I've been taking the long haul back and getting everything I can do. A friend of mine, one thing that happened, I got ripped out of my job. I got ripped out of my career, the career that my dad got me started in, and I disappeared. In fact, if you go back to the trade magazines back in those days, there are searches. What happened to Kid Curry? Where did Kid Curry go? I just disappeared. So after being away, the one guy I was in touch with every year his name was Vince Pellegrino. His birthday was April Fool's Day. I'm a 420 baby. So every April Fool's, I would call him, and every 420, he would call me. And we did that during my career. But a couple of years after I left the business, my phone rang on April 1st. On my birthday, April 20th. And it was Vince. I'm like, Vince, how you doing? He says, how you doing? So we got it back together. Every year we'd make that one phone call. Vince was a very busy man. In fact, what he's responsible for was a magazine called the Street Information Network. SIN, SIN. If you're a radio person, the SIN magazine. The difference in that and Billboard, Billboard takes all the big corporate stuff, whereas Vince would take all the independent stuff, a lot of the independent things. But every year, Vince had this ceremony that he would have. You see the Grammys and that Beyonce, they all get their awards, but they wouldn't get those awards if the promoters wouldn't get the songs on the radio stations. So every year, Vince would have a big ceremony in New York City at B.B. King's Blues Club. And he would give out awards to all the promoters, the guys who did the real street work. And it became a famous convention. It was a big time thing. People talk about it. They still talk about it. One afternoon, I got a phone call. Vince says, listen, man, I think you need to come to my ceremony this year at BB King's because I think I need to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. I had done some really big things in radio, apparently, to some people. And he thought that, you disappeared, man, and people want to see you. They want to know what you're doing. And I want to give you an award. So I'll fly you and your family out here. Brought us into New York. Got to see people I hadn't seen since I got kicked out of the business. And it was so influential and I loved it so much and it was great and the crowd was awesome. And, it was the first time anybody saw me in a wheelchair and, it really, I didn't know what to think. It really filled me because I had been, before I got diagnosed, I was the guy everybody wanted to be close to. Right. But after I got diagnosed, wait a minute, nobody wants to be close to the guy on crutches. Nobody wants to be close to the guy in the wheelchair. So I had a real mental thing happen to me. But this really filled my heart. And so the next day, Vince comes over to my hotel and he has breakfast. He says, so, thanks for coming. I need to let you know something. I'm real sick and I'm going to die. And the reason I brought you out here is because I want to wake you up. I want you to try to come back somehow. You need to come back and do something. And I'm telling Vince, I first of all, it broke my heart. The guy who really picked me up after getting kicked down had told me he was going to die. And within 2-3 months, he was gone. But, he radio and music, I had been real influential in music, real influential in radio, but 8 years had gone by. You can't get back into that business. It had completely changed. Music styles change. And so there's no way I could get back into the radio music business. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to write the story. I wanted to write the story of the radio career, the diagnosis, the trouble with the diagnosis, the things we need to do to help save America's health industry. And I want to tell you about my friend Vince, who picked me up. And so I had this thought to write that. But, I didn't know anything about writing a book. I'm a radio DJ. What do we know about writing books? So I thought, well, I'm going to go out and hire somebody. So I happened to find the Northern Colorado Writers Association up here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I went to one of their meetings. And I told them, listen, I need somebody to help me write this book. I'm a big famous radio DJ. And it was kind of funny. But they said, well, we're going to send you off to the lady who actually founded our organization. She had retired from there and she had been doing some outside work. So they connected me with Carrie Flanagan. And Carrie Flanagan is a famous author. She writes books about the Guide to Magazine article writing. She does things like this. And so Carrie, first, when I called her, she didn't, she was like, well, you got things to do, man. I can't even talk to you now. You got things to learn. So go get this book and go read this book and go do that. And I'll talk to you. This was in November. No, it was in September. She says, I'll talk to you in January. Okay. What does that mean? So I went out and I got these books. I started reading, and there's a book. If you want to learn to write a book, here's the book you want to get. Save the Cat Strikes Back.
Might have to write that one down.
Can't tell you the author. Save the Cat Strikes Back. You read that book and it teaches you about the spine. You need to find a spine of the story. And then you need to come up with all these little things that weave back to the spine of the story. And it was like, whoa, that's how you do this. So then January comes along and she says, have you read? And I said, well, yes, ma'am, I believe I have. And she asked me some questions. And then she said, okay, well, now you need to start doing some research. And I want you to start writing some things and sending it to me. We're doing this all on computer and I'll let you know how you're doing. So I researched for 6 months and wrote down some things I wanted to talk about because, this is my career. I had to go back and, I've had, Frank Sturgis, a Watergate burglar on my show. I Casey and the Sunshine Band, personal friends, Wyclef Jean, personal friends. I had a thing happen to me at the White House. In fact, one of the exacerbations I had happened at the White House. Now, because I was the nighttime DJ, this kid with a little tiny voice, Kid Curry, when I was in Washington, D.C., I was on the radio from 6 till 10 o'clock at night. And before I leave the radio show, I would do a thing called bed check. I would let kids call in and just make comments. Hey, my teacher this, or my class sucks, or whatever. I just let them call in and I'd fire things back at them. But in Washington, D.C., for the first time, my extremely teeny-oriented feature became political. Suddenly start getting all this political talk. And then one night, this guy calls and he says, hey, this is Frank DeFramer. I'm over here at the White House, and President Reagan was just in here listening to the bed check. And I'm like, sure. And I hang up and I go to the next call. Well, this goes 3 or 4 nights of this. Hey, the president was just in here listening to your bed check. I'm like, wait a minute, hang on. Put him on hold. Who are you? He says, well, I'm Frank DeFramer. Surprisingly enough, they need someone to do the maintenance on the frames at the White House. So that's what I do. I'm Frank DeFramer. And I have an office downstairs, and the president was in here actually listening to your bed check. I was shocked. Wow. Couldn't believe it. So that's just one little story. I had to go back and come up and remember all these stories.
Yeah.
But to finish that, now here's what happened. This is when the exacerbation happened. I leave Washington, D.C., and I move up to Baltimore. Girlfriend I had, her grandma comes to town from Texas. In the conversation, yeah, I know a guy at the White House, Frank DeFramer. Well, if you know somebody, I want a tour. No. So then I call the White House, and first of all, I don't know if there's really a guy by the name of Frank DeFramer. This guy's only told me this on the telephone. So I call the White House, and I'm like, excuse me, could I speak to Frank DeFramer? Oh, sure, hang on 1 second, I'll get him. I'm like, whoa, wow. Frank DeFramer. I couldn't believe it. And he picks up the phone and says, it's Frank DeFramer. And Frank, it's Kid Curry. Kid, how you doing? What's up? Oh, Frank, I'm so glad you know me, man. My girlfriend's grandma wants to come take a tour. So he sets it up. He says, listen, man, when you get here, just tell him that you're here to see Frank DeFramer. I'll let everybody know that you're coming. So whoever you talk to, just tell him you need to come and see me. Now, this is after Reagan's assassination attempt.
Oh, yeah.
There is no changes yet around the White House. So I'm driving around the White House. And if you know how to do it, you can actually make a big circle and you go back around a couple times. And there was this one road that I kept, well, look, man, that looks like right to the side of the White House. So I'll go up that road. So I start driving up in my little Toyota Corolla. And as I'm getting closer, men start coming and drawing their guns on me.
Oh, man.
And I'm thinking, oh, crap.
Wrong
now, what happens with multiple sclerosis is stress is the devil. Okay. So as I'm pulling up and the guns are coming at me, my stress level is just cranking. So by the time I stop the car and I take my hand and I open the door, I fall out because my body has just given up. And I think that I'm just maybe sick to my stomach or whatever, and I'm falling to the ground. And these guys are, freeze. I'm here for Frank DeFramer. I fall out of the car. Oh, Kid Curry, how you doing? Come on. Can we get you a wheelchair?
Oh, wow.
No, you can get one for grandma. I'll be all right. So, these exacerbations happen and then they go away. So within another 20 minutes or so, I was okay and I could walk and I was fine. Did not know what it was. But I had to go back and remember this whole story and make all these notes so I could tell this story and amongst the zillion others that are in the memoir. So I researched for 6 months, and then it took me another 6 to 8 months to write the story. And she was behind me every moment. Carrie Flanagan, every time I turn a page in, there'd be like little red marks, like you get from your teacher.
Like going back to school, yeah.
Yeah, but I learned a lot, and I got into a groove. In fact, as soon as I was finished with that, I had an idea for a fiction. So I wrote another story about that. It's a short story that talks about, it's called The Death of Fairness. It talks about What happened to a small town and its only radio station after President Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. Now, that's the rule that requires equal time for contrasting points of view. You take that rule out, effectively, you make lies legal without debate.
Wow. So, man,
Well,
you've lived a
I
full
throw
life.
a lot of stuff at you, Brian. You okay
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just, you've lived such a full life. So ups and downs and everything in between, but what's Kid Curry up to nowadays? What you got going on now?
Well, it's what's important to me now is, I have officially become a writer. Like I said, I've published those 2 books. I've just finished my 3rd. It's an 82,000 word novel, kind of the second to The Death of Fairness. It's called Bonnie's Law, The Return to Fairness. I'm shipping it right. I'm shopping it out now with agents. And if I don't get an agent to grab it, I will self-publish it. So I write all the time now, and I write about positive things. This whole story is an empowerment young woman's story who is adamant that the damage done by that 1987 decision has changed America, and so much that she decides she wants to run to be the president and bring back the Fairness Doctrine. But it's very much an empowerment story. I'm also very involved in my multiple sclerosis families around here. When I got diagnosed, for years, I'd go to my doctor's office. You roll in the doctor's office, there's other people sitting there, and nobody talks to anybody.
Right.
No. Okay, who's worse? And I see some miserable stuff. I think I don't have it bad. I know people who have it really bad.
Yeah.
So then after 4 or 5, maybe 8 years, the doctor says, you ought to try to go to some of these men over 50 with MS meetings. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go. And oh boy, couldn't believe it. I roll into a meeting with guys who were just like me, having the same problems just like me. I'm going to pee. I got to go. Oh, my eye, I can't see. Oh, look at my hand. It curled up. It was amazing to me because I'd been in the waiting room, but I'd never talked about it. And to have these men interplay and us talk about our condition and how we all have because remember what multiple sclerosis is. There are lesions appear on your brain. Depending on where that lesion lands is what body part is affected. My lesions are around whatever controls my lower extremities, and in my shoulder. And we all have eye problems. We all have terrible neuro something they call it, I don't know. But it was interesting to talk to these men. What I didn't like about it was, I'm a real advocate. I'm going to push through, man. I mean, I act like I don't have MS. I try not to think about it. If I got to crawl along the floor to get something, I will crawl along the floor. If I'm at a store and I've got to ask somebody to give me something from the top floor, I will do it. I don't care. So I'm a real pusher. I try to be adamant about what I've got. And what bothers me though, is when some of these men say things like, I've tried all the medicine. Nothing's changing me, so I'm going to stop. And I'm like, God, please don't, man. There's got to be something, but you can't. I'm in these meetings and I can't say, what's wrong with you, man?
Right.
I can only try to come at it, as sensibly as possible, but it bothers me because I'm a fighter. I don't want anybody, because I know people who've died from MS.
Yeah.
I mean, so it does happen, but there is a miracle out there somewhere. I believe that it's going to be cured. I believe there's enough stem cell work going on now. They're trying to. The other problem MS patients have is there's a lining on the nerves called myelin. I don't really understand how this thing works, but apparently that myelin disintegrates, and there's hopes that they can bring back a way to recreate myelin on the nerve endings again. So I believe that we're 10 years away from coming up with some real answers here with MS. I hope.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep fighting for them. I'm a big advocate. I want to wait a minute. My doctor's book, I want to point this out. Optimal Health with Multiple Sclerosis. Dr. Alan Bowling. He's my vitamin D guy. I'm telling you, man. If you got MS, take vitamin D. You know what? Even if you don't have MS, here's the thing I learned during the pandemic. Vitamin D it helps in your respiratory system. In the very beginning of the pandemic, doctors were saying, take vitamin D, take it now. And my whole family takes vitamin D. I press them, take it now. So I encourage everyone, but I'm not a doctor. Don't do it until you talk to your doctor. Okay, never mind.
What was the book? Could you hold the book up one more time? Because it cut out a little bit.
I'm sorry, man. It's Optimal Health with Multiple Sclerosis. Dr. Alan Bowling is his name.
Now when we spoke before, and I like the story, and so I think I'd like to get it in on this episode. But you had, so you're in your house, and you had an opportunity to get a home studio set up, and that was a pretty cool story. You want to share that with our folks?
It was funny because, when after you become a writer, you think, well, now, of course, this got to be in an audio form. I should do an audiobook. And because I'm a radio guy, I should do my own audiobook. It was funny. I thought I was going to, there's a punk band here in Fort Collins, and they're legendary. They're called Dependents. Dents, Dependents. They're out of California, been strong for over 30 years, but they end up here in Fort Collins. They've got this studio that is like some decrepit old building, because remember, Colorado's old. This town's been here since like 1870, so there are some really old buildings here. And so I drive up, I find this studio, and because you Google the best recording studio in Fort Collins, and it's these guys. So I go there, and it's not handicap accessible. So I get out of my wheelchair and I grab my crutches, and I got to take it slow. I'm telling you, it's dangerous. So I get all the way to the back, and it's a cool studio. Because remember, man, I've been to Criteria back in the 70s. I've been to studios, okay? But this is a really cool old studio. They got, all their stuff around, great equipment, and I get all the way to the back. But by the time I get to the back to talk to these guys about them recording my voice for my audiobook, my body's in total seizure. So I can't even sit in the chair. My legs are sitting. My daughter is holding on to my shirt to keep me in the chair. Like, listen, can you guys record my audiobook? I'm sure I can do this. But then, I left there, and I thought about it really hard, and I thought, there's no way. I'm not going to be able to do it this way. But the guys at the recording studio sent me their #1 engineer to my house. And he came to my house and told me that I needed to buy this. If you can't see it behind me, I have a sound closet behind me. Set that up for me, and then sat here and helped me edit my entire process. It taught me how to do it. And then they did all the hardcore work for me, but it was very nice. Jonathan Luganbill is his name. And he works over at that studio with Dependents, that punk rock, and they are hardcore. And the drummer, the guy, Bill Stevenson is his name. And he's the drummer. He's the original founder. This guy's had like major brain problems, surgeries to put his head back together. But when you see him, you're like, stop, you're going to blow up. He's old. He's almost as old as me, but he cranks. And that is a great band. If you're into punk rock, Dependents. Okay. So these guys came and did that for me. And then I did all the editing myself. They helped me download it into the system. So both my books available at Amazon and on Audible. Come Get Me, Mother, I'm Through, and The Death of Fairness.
And third book on its way.
Yes, I'm really excited about that one. That one's going to be fun.
And how can people they hear the story, it's resonating with them, they want to learn more about you? You've got a website. Let's go ahead and promote that.
All right, Brian, I'm at krcurry.com. Depending on when you play this, I believe in like the next 2 or 3 days, I've got a new website appearing. The old one was very functional, did really good things for me, but I'm going to a new website that's put together by writers for writers. So it does things that I need it to do. I can change my blogs, I can change my audio and video. So I'm going there so I can kind of do it myself, because I'm actually preparing to go into my 4th book now. And it's going to take me a year, but I've got this vision. Not yet. I'll tell you later. We'll have to talk again, Brian.
So you fully have converted into an author and writer. Is there any, with today's advances, we'll call them, in technology. Any thoughts of trying to get back on the air with whether it be radio or podcasting or any of that?
Pardon me. No, people last year during the pandemic, in the very beginning of the pandemic, I was tortured by the fact that the administration had no clue what was going on, although I kind of had it figured out by the end of January. And I'm just a guy. Okay, so I was tortured by the fact that we got to March and there was nothing, and then suddenly,
Right.
Well, it affects me. Stress affects MS. I couldn't sleep. I had to get my mind off of that guy and what was going on at the time. So it's crazy enough. I happened to see a friend on Facebook say he was sad because now he couldn't have cocktails with his friends. So I hit him up on Facebook real quick and I said, go get a cocktail. We'll do a live Facebook FaceTime together and we'll do a cocktail together on FaceTime. Well, during that, he starts saying, we could have all of our other friends do this. And I thought, oops, that's what I'll do. I'm going to go get all of our old friends and we're going to talk Miami radio. And I have some fairly famous old friends, that are fairly influential in the business and in movies and things. My friend Maddie Momfort was on Univision's Sábado Gigante, and if you know anything about Latin TV, the biggest TV show for decades was Sábado Gigante. Robert W. Walker helped produce the Gloria Estefan play in New York City. I've got a zillion friends, so I just started once a week. I thought, well, let me just go on and I'll do interviews with these guys. And it made me think about what I was going to do because I had no idea how to even get on Facebook Live and have two people. So I had to figure that out. So it totally took my mind off of the disaster that was happening. But so I did these. In fact, I'm sure people can find them. They were under because back then we were saying that you shouldn't start drinking. Don't everybody start drinking just because you're sitting home. So I said, we're going to have one cocktail with kids. So I called it One Cocktail with Kid. And I do these shows maybe almost every night for about a month or so. And I had all my friends on, and I've got, like I said, I got some very good friends who came to help me out, and it was a lot of fun and it distracted me. But you got to remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we all were talking, well, 6 to 8, 10 weeks, we'll be done with this. No problem.
Right.
But, my wife, once again, the international business coach, where everybody else's job stopped and came to a screeching halt. My wife's job got busier because her job, what she decided to do was to get her clients ready for when it was over. And besides, people sold houses during the pandemic. That still happened. Yeah. So there was still a real estate industry going on, but she was preparing people for what was going to happen after the pandemic, which is what I got into. What's going to happen? You don't have a job. If you want to recreate yourself now, get on Google and say, how can I become and how can I do, and and we're all going to have to recreate. If you can recreate yourself, this is the time to do so. So the guests that I was having on at the time, we were all talking about those kind of things. So, I tried to keep my mind away from the disaster, try to be as positive as I can. And it was a lot of fun. So if anybody, I know you can find them out there. I don't know.
There's somewhere out there.
I don't understand the
Cocktails
internet,
with Kid.
Somebody will say, "Oh, I know where those are."
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can dig them up. I'll put a link if it's out there. I could put a link.
There's
in the
some
description.
real humor there. There's a guy that was a news guy for us in Miami named Jim Reilly, and Jim is one of these extremely eclectic, humorous men. And in fact, I do these things and get like 500, 600 people viewing these things. Wow. So it was a pretty big deal. I wasn't thousands, but for me, 500 was pretty good. I think Jim had like 800 people coming back to watch his thing. So there's some real humor there. But it was my distraction. It was me doing the radio thing again. But you know what I discovered, Brian? Then it became too much obsession for me.
Okay.
Because again, I was thinking about it too much, and it became so much that I couldn't put it away. And I can't do that with MS. I mean, stress, after a few weeks, I'm starting to get real tired, and I can't think about what I got to do. I'm not communicating during the interviews, and I'm forgetting questions. And so I had to just stop and do what I want to do. And that's right. You see, there's no stress here, man. I can come in here and, you know, my fictions, I come up with a scenario. And if it makes sense, and believe me, Carrie, my writing coach, is still on everything I do. This last book I just wrote, 84,000 words of this novel, she's been over every page. This is fun for me. I do this. This is exciting, and there's no stress as long as it makes sense. And, you know, I have fact checkers. She's my fact checker. And then I've got to go to another fact checker here soon. So these are, although it's fiction, it needs to make sense.
Yeah.
So I now just make up stuff. And this next one I'm going to make up, I'm going to get you, man. Because I still believe that this thing that happened in 1987 is the devil. And the reason we have the division in America today is because lies are legal without debate. Remember, they have a fairness doctrine in Canada. They don't have the division we have in America.
Yeah, no, good point.
So this next one, I'm going to try to rip the Band-Aid off of how it happened. It's not going to be true, but it's going to be my things. And it's going to be tough because I've got to go all the way back to, you know, I've got to go back to Gorbachev and Reagan meetings.
Yeah.
I've got to go back to when Putin was a young KGB man, because I'm going to, and Rupert Murdoch is involved in this somehow. Anyway, this is what I'm coming. So.
Very cool. Well, I tell you what, I've got one last question for you, and I usually it's usually the same question for everyone. So if you've listened to any podcast, you probably know already. But as we get ready to wrap up here, I mean, you're truly an inspiration, if nothing else, for me, just to see your energy, the positivity, the keep moving forward, even when life, throws something in your way. So just your story alone is inspiration. But as we get ready to wrap up, if nothing else, if the listeners took nothing else from this conversation, what would be your final parting words of wisdom? Like, write this down, don't leave home without it type.
I don't think you can wait. And it's funny, I heard this the other day from that lady on America's Got Talent, but you can't wait for life to be good before you go ahead and do good. You have to go ahead and just, I always say, when you wake up in the morning, you look outside, if it's there, you're okay. So get going. So, I'm a real believer in getting up in the morning and putting yourself in a positive attitude. You control your mind. Pollution, it's people pollution that makes you have a bad day. So put yourself in the right place to be able to deflect that pollution. You are put here for a reason. The reason is to make life, as Muhammad Ali said, do good things. That's your rent for living here. Okay. So that's the whole process. Do good things. Think well. That matters.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. I truly appreciate it. And I'm sure others listening will as well. So hang tight. Don't go anywhere. We will do a off the air wrap up. So thanks again, Kim.
Thanks, Brian.